Welcome back to the People's Basics, the home of the universal basics. We're here once again with an episode of the People's Platform where we talk to you, the members of our community, about the issues that matter most to you. Today on the program, we're going to be talking to Kate McMinnon. I hope I did not butcher that. I apologize in advance if I did, as well as Rachel Willis. And we're talking to them about their belief that we need to be embracing patriotism as a concept on the left and in the Democratic Party to try and combat some of the co-opting that has been done with the Republican Party on that kind of branding. And so we are talking to them about this new organization that they founded called Patriots Believe. But before we get into that interview with them, we want to remind you all to please make sure that you have joined our community here at the People's Basics by making sure that you are subscribed, as well as checking the description section down below, where you will find our Linktree link to join our community. But without further ado, let's bring on to the program Kate and Rachel. Okay, Kate and Rachel, welcome to the People's Basics.
Thank you.
Hi.
You're very welcome. So I would love to ask you both, before we get into the subject of patriotism, I would love to ask you kind of a little bit about yourselves so that the community can know where you were coming from before you had this. I had read that you both are teachers, but where are you guys based out of and how do you guys politically identify? Rachel, I'd love to hear from you first.
Yeah, sure. So I am based in Atlanta, which is my hometown. I joined Teach for America after college, and I taught for 8 years elementary school. And I'm no longer in the classroom, but I still support educators. I run Elevating Equity, and we support educators and education nonprofits in creating anti-racist environments. So we think about what does that mean for our curriculum? What does that mean for professional development? And even like hiring processes. How are we understanding equity in terms of that and what that means? And so this is a continuation with Patriots Believe of making sure social justice and racial justice is living out, but in a different way.
Okay, wonderful. And how about yourself, Kate?
Sure. I also joined Teach for America right out of college, and I taught in Washington, D.C. for 5 years and then moved into the administrative building in D.C. And so I worked on their teacher evaluation system for several years. Now I'm actually in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I'm with the school district here. I work in their early childhood department. So I oversee the curriculum for our pre-kindergarten classrooms for the district. And much like Rachel, I think we have a lot to do in the world of education, but also in all other facets of our lives to really make a difference and make a change. You asked how we identify politically. I'm a Democrat. And so I think we have a lot of work to do there and a lot of work to do for the party. So.
Okay, wonderful. So
yeah, and let me, for the record, say I'm definitely a left-leaning Democrat.
Thank you for that clarification. So, Rachel, I'd love to ask you what brought you to this cause of patriotism being something that you think needed to be tackled and advocated for on the left?
Yeah. So, America has been rough. It has been a very rough place to live in since 2015. Ever since the man who will not be named came down the escalator. That was just a defining moment. And I think we've seen since then how the idea of patriotism has really been co-opted by the right wing, and it has become something so nasty. But when I think about patriots, I think about my father, who was a Marine, who always is like Semper Fi till the day I die. I think about my uncle who was in the service and came back home disabled, but like how we were taught what that sacrifice meant. I think about all of the AmeriCorps members across the country who are going into schools and organizations and just trying to better their communities. And to me, that's what patriotism is. It's a love for the country, but also knowing that our country still hasn't lived up to the values that it set out to do. And so we love what it is, and we're going to push it to be more. And I think how we've seen patriotism defined since 2015 has really been like, oh, I love the flag. And it's been about nationalism. And I believe as patriots, and particularly as liberal and progressive Democrats, we need to make sure that we're realigning and that we're not giving that much power away to the right wing. And we need to say, like, no, as patriots, we love this country. That's why we're going to fight for it. And sometimes fighting for it means, you know, how AOC showed up in the tax the rich dress at the Met to make everyone uncomfortable. It's getting those messages out. And it's just not giving away our ability to say we can love this country and nationalism is not the way.
Okay. And how about yourself, Kate? How did you come to this cause, and how do you define patriotism?
Sure. Well, Rachel really hit a lot of the high notes there. I guess we came to this idea in a conversation together many years ago, where really what I was finding was I myself was distancing from the flag. I was distancing myself from the idea of patriotism and from being proud of this country. I really found myself feeling distanced but didn't like that feeling. I wanted to, what I actually talked about with my wife, and we tell this story, is I would talk with my wife about how I wanted to fly the American flag in front of our home, but I wanted to fly it with a Black Lives Matter sign and a rainbow flag next to it. That's the American flag that I wanted to see. And I wanted anybody who saw my home to know that I'm a proud American, and I believe Black Lives Matter, and I believe love is love. And that to me felt very different from what I normally see. And it felt very different from what I found myself feeling when I saw the American flag. I didn't find myself feeling when I saw the American flag that I could trust that that person believed Black Lives Matter, or that person believed climate change was real, or that no human is illegal. I had other associations built up in my own mind about what it meant when I saw the flag and when I thought about patriots. And that really was making me sad. And so the more we talk about this, we found, some commonality there. Rachel, that feeling resonated with Rachel. And then as we started talking with other family members and friends, we found that they felt the same way. And the more we talked about that, we were like, we just gave this away. We just said, all right, I mean, you claimed it, so you can have it. And how wrong that is. And so when I think, and the more I thought about it, my mom is an incredible activist. And when I think about a patriot, it's my mom, who has been active in social justice work her entire life. That's a patriot. I look at Rachel, who's doing incredible work with elevating equity. And I'm like, that's a patriot working to make this country better. And we just kind of gave that away. So that was really the catalyst, that conversation we had about wanting to reclaim that pride and to realign that pride. And then we started to think about what would it actually look like if we started to claim patriotism. And we thought it was an interesting idea.
So I'd love to ask you both, what do you think is kind of the origin of why this drift kind of occurred between the right and the left in identifying with patriotism? I think we've definitely seen that kind of split a little bit more in the 21st century. Do you think there's anything specific that caused that problem where the right was much more willing to embrace it, but the left started to stray away from it? Rachel, do you have any thoughts on that subject?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that subject.
Sure.
I can highlight two that I think. One, I think, is just the association with the flag. So I think about my own childhood growing up, and my mom, like staunch Democrat, community activist. One day I was just like, oh, we have Reagan's flag. And she's like, what do you mean we have Reagan's flag? I'm like, that's his flag. He flies it all the time. And I had made that association that this flag, the United States of America's flag, belonged to this one man and his party. And I think we've been seeing the same thing since 2015 as well, with just like really good imagery. And so you're not only getting explicit messages from the right wing that they consider themselves to be patriots, but you're also implicitly seeing it. And so that is coming in your mind. But I think the second piece is that we've just been through a lot. Even when we think about the Black Lives Matter movement, if we start with the murder of Trayvon Martin and take a look at George Zimmerman's acquittal and everything that's happened with police brutality across the country, when we take a look at everything that's happening with women's reproductive rights and the rights of anyone who engages in reproductive health, when we take a look at voting right assaults, like everything that we as progressives and liberals hold dear has been under assault this last decade. And I think that can be tiring because you get to these moments where you're like, why am I fighting for a country that's not fighting for me? And so that can be really hard. I know for me as a Black person, there were times during the last administration where I was so frightened, I literally was creating like exit strategies, like researching where are some countries where I can live comfortably, I can take my parents with me, and we can go be Black expats. And while it seems like, oh, that was like, maybe you're a little neurotic, there's an entire community of Black expats that came just from those last few years. And so I think what let us give it away is exhaustion. It is not seeing our country show up for us the way it wanted to. And I think I'm just one of those people who's like, and yet we're going to keep fighting anyway.
How about you, Kate? Are there any things in specific that you think has led to that kind of drift?
I think Rachel really hit the nail on the head with both the explicit and the implicit. The explicit and the implicit that's happening. But I think it's also that the left has sort of given it away in an effort to be very clear that we are not that. So we wanted to be very clear that we are not white supremacists. And because right now the flag has become more associated with, we'll just say right wing, whatever. That was the fear, honestly, of flying the flag, was that then people would think we were white supremacists. I can't have that. I mean, I can't have that. And so then I can't fly the flag. And so then it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling cycle where we shy away from it because it's representing these things that we don't want, which is why we are trying to so explicitly tie together patriotism and these values that we believe so we can change that image, so that we aren't afraid that flying the flag tells our neighbor a belief we hold, which isn't true at all.
I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that comes to my own mind when it comes to this drift is I made note of, I think, it increasing in the 21st century. Obviously, there was still some divide even in the 20th century. You look at the Vietnam War and the whole divide over patriotism of opposing that war. But I think it amplified in the 21st century because we finally had an attack on domestic soil in 9/11 that I think made a lot of people feel like they had to be a very loyalist to the country so that they didn't seem like a traitor. But then you had an anti-war movement prop up when we went into Iraq that was mainly led by a lot of the Democrats in that. And so they essentially were called, in many cases, essentially traitors. And this kind of became a big divide of patriotism in that kind of aspect. And I think it's only been further amplified by kind of social media that has put us more into these bubbles and made us more aware of all these various different problems that has made, some people on the left a little bit less proud in our nation and potentially in our history. But I'd love to ask you, in your cause of Patriots Believe, how you think we can kind of go about, reclaiming that value. What explicitly do you think needs to be done to spread the need for adopting this? What do you tell people for why it's so essential for us to reclaim that flag? I'll start with Rachel on this one. What do you think?
I think it's important. There's a quote from Gandhi, I'm just going to paraphrase, which is basically your beliefs become your words and your words become your actions. And so I think it's important because we need to make sure that what we're believing is living out in everything that we're doing. And I think if we're saying that we're patriots and we love our country, then that means I'm going to show up differently. I'm not going to be passive in my community. I'm actually going to go join a community board. I'm going to tune in to what's happening in my local city council. I'm going to make sure that whoever is my state senator, they know who I am and that I'm a community activist, because we know that's where legislation was happening in Texas that has done so much harm now. And so I think claiming patriotism means I show up differently, but I also think it's important to know we're not alone. Like, there is a community, and there's so many people across the country who are in isolation. We saw how the last several years has really torn families apart. Like, family friends who I had, and like, I've just been devastated by how they've attacked me for being progressive and liberal. And I know I'm in the South, but still, like, dang. And so we need to make sure that people know that even if I feel isolated within my family at this dinner table, even if I feel isolated in this neighborhood with what I'm seeing in this state, like, I have a community that I can go to that's going to re-energize, that I know believes in the same things that I do, and it's going to help me plug in to figure out how can I actually make change.
And Kate, can you explain what Patriots Believe tries to do to address this issue and reclaim patriotism? What actions are you specifically trying to accomplish?
Sure. We're doing a couple things. Most prominent is we're making shirts. And that seems quite simple and obvious, but we think it can have a really profound impact. So you actually think about MAGA hats, for example. I mean, that is a huge core of that entire movement or effort or whatever. And I think it became so because they made the beliefs or the associations that they have on the inside visible on the outside. And we need to do that same thing. So we know that we're walking around, I believe Black Lives Matter, and I know my 5 friends believe Black Lives Matter, but no one at the grocery store at Publix in Kroger and Publix in Florida, or Kroger's in Ohio where my parents are, they don't know that, especially looking at me the way I look. Don't make that assumption. And so we need to start making those beliefs that we hold on the inside visible on the outside. To Rachel's point about building community and making people aware that they're not alone. And we want to make those beliefs, for example, Black Lives Matter, women control wombs, women plus control wombs. We want that to be clear, and we want to align that clearly with patriotism. So all of our shirts read not just Black Lives Matter, but Patriots Believe Black Lives Matter. And then on the back of the shirt is the definition of a patriot. And so what we have found is wearing the shirts genuinely causes people's brains to do mental gymnastics. You watch it when you wear the shirts because you don't expect to see the word patriot next to climate change. And you don't expect to see the word patriot next to no human is illegal. And so you watch people read the shirt and they see the first word. You can see the shirt. It says Patriots Believe, and then the slogan underneath. And they read Patriot and they're like, and then they read the second part. They're like, I mean, you watch their minds confused, which is what we want. So then half of the people are like, oh, I also believe climate change is real. Could I be a patriot too? Or the other half are like, I thought I was a patriot and I don't believe climate change is real. I don't understand what's happening here. And so we want that thought process to be happening for people. And so we're doing that, I mean, physically with merchandise. So with shirts, with water bottles, with tote bags. I mean, imagine what it would feel like if you were walking through the grocery store and you saw all these people walking around with shirts that said, Patriots believe climate change is real. Patriots believe Black Lives Matter. Patriots believe women control wombs. I think it'd be an awesome grocery store trip. So we're doing that. And then we are also building a social media community. We're talking with folks. We really think that this is going to be a conversation piece. So that's why I reached out to all of you. It's why I'm reaching out to other folks, Rachel as well, just to see where we can have conversations to open this door and open the minds, perhaps, of liberal and progressive folks to consider themselves patriots and join this work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think a lot of people kind of have this silent belief that they would like to be patriots, frankly, but that they don't feel that they can associate it with currently because it's a very explicit message of conservatism currently. And so kind of bringing that real policy connected to it immediately offsets it, like you explained with the flag example previously. I'd love to talk about some of the platform items of how you currently define patriotism. I read on your website your current platform includes Black Lives Matter, climate change is real, love is love, no human is illegal, healthcare is a human right, women plus control their wombs, voter rights, and civil rights. And so I wanted to ask you about a couple of those. The first one, and I'll ask you, Rachel, about this. Can you define what Black Lives Matter really means? What does a life mattering really mean to you?
Well, I think mattering is like the bare minimum. And so Black Lives Matter to me means I'm just going to allow you to exist. I'm going to allow you to breathe. I'll speak for myself personally. It's been really hard over the last decade just to watch so many people unarmed be murdered. And even harder than that, grieving with those families has been watching people justified in my own communities and circles. And so it's just that acknowledgement of like, we deserve to live here. We are here, we deserve to live. And so that's the minimum. But beyond that, I think once we know like that's the minimum, there are other layers to it too. And I think that's where all the other values come in of like, yes, I am a Black person. I don't want to worry about myself. I don't want to worry about my family, that they're not going to make it home at night because of an interaction with a police officer or a white supremacist. I want to know that this country values us enough that that's not an anxiety I need to have. I can be anxious about something else, but not that. But what I also want to know is if I know everybody can make it home, do I also know that as a resident in Georgia, I'm not going to suffer from voter suppression because voter rights are civil rights. And we know that and we act on it and we fight for it as a country. Does it also mean that my descendants are going to be okay? And as they have children, they have that choice to make because we prioritize the fact that like we were going to take care of this country because we believe that climate change is real and what we're doing to the environment is impacting us, but also future generations will never meet. And so it's those additional layers that add on some of our values.
Okay. And Kate, I'd love to ask you on the subject of real love is love. I obviously associate that with the LGBTQ plus community. Could you speak a little bit specifically about what you're still looking to advocate within that space? Is it a similar notion of just feeling that inclusion and a reduction in anxiety, or are there other things that you're looking for people who want to embrace this platform to also adopt?
Sure. It's funny you just said the word adopt because we're actually looking into that right now, my partner and I. And that wasn't legal not too long ago, nor was our marriage legal in many states 6 years ago. And that's nothing. I mean, that's nothing. And so, I think it certainly is a deeply personal one to me. And I think we want for the LGBTQ plus community to have all of the rights that everyone else does, to not worry that if your partner is in the hospital, you're not going to be able to go, or to worry that if your child is sick, you're not going to be able to be with them because the state's not recognizing you as a parent. And so, we chose love is love because it's pretty commonly known as reflecting the gay community. And so I think it's not only that we're looking to reflect it's okay to love anyone you want, but also we want the rights that go along with it. Sure. That's a part of that one too.
Okay. And I would love to ask you both on this. One of them that you had is healthcare is a human right. Do you mind speaking a little bit more of defining that? There's obviously maybe the spectrum of what people consider as the critical essential healthcare. There's a variety of different proposals. Is there anything specific that word means to you? Rachel, what does that phrase really mean to you?
Yeah. So, universal health care, I think, is just something we should have. And I know people are like, oh, but the budget and the deficit, but we were just spending millions and millions of dollars every single day in Afghanistan. And now all of a sudden we have some money. So let's talk about what we're going to do with it. Because if we have that to spend on a defense budget, we can keep people safe. But it's personal to me too. My sister passed away in 2018 from breast cancer.
Sorry to hear
And
that.
thank you. And I just remember like the last year of her life, the fights that we had to go through just to get her health care covered. And it was like you've paid into something for 44 years and different insurances, and you're still fighting. And you're fighting at the time when you're the weakest and when your full concentration should be on just like getting through this cancer and killing that. And yet your attention, like we literally sat in the hospital at one time and had to write our senator, Senator Perdue at the time, and say, hey, can we like not focus on these pre-existing conditions? Because I don't think you realize how many people are going to be harmed, like including us right now, writing you from the cancer center. And so I think that there are things that we have just found ways to capitalize on that should just be right. And the more we can get out of that mindset of like deficit based and think about how is this actually going to be an asset for our country? If we just as a baseline take care of people's healthcare, what could that mean for us? And so that's why we believe healthcare is a human right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I love the point you brought up about how people shouldn't be having that concern when they're trying to recover. Like if you actually look at medical studies, there is proven time and time again that stress literally harms the healing process.
Yep.
Like it is actually harder to heal because you are stressed out dealing with the insurers trying to get coverage for what they're supposed to be providing you. But they try to find all these loopholes to basically not get you the money that you need in that. But let me ask Kate, do you have any specifics, or do you try to have a little bit more of a broad sense of just it being universal? There's obviously some people propose like Medicare for all, some do like a public option. Do you want like everyone under the sun, or do you want more of a specific adoption of something?
I want everyone under the sun. There's no reason in this country. That's ridiculous. That's all there is. That's all I have to say about it. That's ridiculous in this country that we do not have incredible health care for literally every human here. It's ridiculous that we can't do it. Well, we can do it. It's ridiculous we haven't.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I can't say that there is any group or that I would want to have more or less. Every human is valuable, and every human should be able to be cared for in the richest country in the world. So
yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, for the people who love to claim that America is number one at everything, I hope you'll all look at the WHO's rankings of countries on their healthcare efficacy. Currently, the United States ranks 37th in that ranking. And currently, we are spending double per capita compared to the rest of the OECD nations on average. So we are spending more and we are getting worse quality. And we are not even having everyone covered. There's roughly 9% of Americans who have no healthcare coverage whatsoever. And there are vastly more who are undercovered and are still suffering the bills when they are even insured themselves. So I wholeheartedly agree. And it's a very basic thing. But I'd love to ask you if you have any final thoughts that you'd love to share with the universal people. As well, we always love at the end, we give you the opportunity to ask me questions if you have any. Rachel, do you have any final remarks or questions that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would just love to hear from you. When you hear the word Patriot, what did you think before you met us? And what do you think now? What do you want it to be?
I will say, even before meeting you all, I wanted to embrace this value. So it's not something that I shied away from. And I have frankly gotten a little bit of flack from my fellows on the left who don't want to fully embrace that. But to me, I see patriotism as a love for your fellow American, first and foremost. And I see that as trying to provide care for them. And obviously, our organization wants to ensure people have the basic needs of life. Yeah. That's what I think when it comes to patriotism. It is simply caring for one another here in this country and trying to do stuff that we can all be proud of. Mm-hmm. I think the idea of what we were doing in somewhat of the 20th century of setting big goals and having these rallying cries of saying we can accomplish great things when we work together is a huge part of patriotism. But unification cannot be the end-all, be-all goal. We must have the actual things that respect each and every person's human rights and basic needs. And if one side is not on board with that yet, we have to move forward without them, and hopefully they'll catch up. That's my version of what patriotism means to me. I hope that sufficiently answers your question.
No, absolutely. Yes.
How about you, Kate? Do you have any final remarks you'd like to share or final questions?
No, I'd just like to thank you for having us on. It's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to anybody who is willing to talk with us, but especially to somebody who is actively trying to make a difference. I mean, you are, and we've listened to your podcast, and the conversations that you open up are valued and needed. And so we thank you for that, and thank you for having us as a part of that conversation. And we hope we can continue.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the compliment, as well as you both taking the time to be on here today. So we hope we all can have you on again. As well, for people who want to check out your organization, Patriots Believe, we encourage everyone to check the description section down below so that you can get to their website and learn more about it. That being said, Rachel and Kate, thank you so much again for coming on to the People's Basics.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So again, that was Kate and Rachel at Patriots Believe. Go check them out if you want to learn more information. I wholeheartedly believe we do need to be re-embracing this moniker, that we love our country, and that when we are proposing these proposals, we are showing love for our nation. We are investing in our nation. That is essential. When people have this notion that we don't love America and we're trying to tear it down, do you really want to put people in charge that have that mindset? I think it's a very natural notion that leadership should love and want to improve the nation that we are in. So again, I want to thank them for coming on and championing that cause as well. As well, we want to remind you all, please come join us here at the People's Basics. Make sure you're subscribed so that you're always notified when we have new content coming out. And as well, in that description section, you'll find our Linktree link to be able to join our community, to be able to get involved in our Discord where we do our organizing, and find all the other places we got stuff going on. So that's another episode for us. We hope you all enjoyed. Make sure you leave the like if you did. And we hope you have a great day. We will see you all next week. And as always, we hope you all stay classy out there.